Ladies and gentlemen, federal employees, welcome back to this week's Q&A where I answer your questions that you submitted. And again, if you have any questions, there's a link below where you can do so. And I've been getting a ton of great questions. Today we have two very, very good questions. And one of them, someone's probably gonna get a lot more than they bargained for because there's a lot to it. So buckle up, we're gonna dive right in. Question number one. They say, hey, I very much appreciate your podcast and videos. Thank you for producing them. You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. They say, I have a question about the traditional TSP to Roth IRA transfer/conversions. I know that each conversion creates a new Roth IRA account and a new 5-year clock for penalty-free withdrawals. However, I am unclear if my contributions to that new IRA are subject to the 5-year rule or only the earnings on those contributions. Okay, so if you are new to the 5-year rule and Roth conversions and Roth IRAs, this may be a whole new topic for you, but let me give you the basics so that you, when you hear this the next time, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I kind of understand what that is. So here's the deal. There is actually two different 5-year rules for a Roth IRA. Okay, there's two different ones, and I've talked about one of them more often than I talk about the other, but both of them are super, super important. And here's the deal. Basically, the first 5-year rule for a Roth IRA says this. It says, when you first open up a Roth IRA and put money into it, you've got to wait at least 5 years before you can take out the earnings tax-free, okay? At least 5 years. And again, you do have to be over 59 and a half, again, but you've got to wait at least 5 years from when you open it. So for example, let's say you are 59 and a half and you open up a Roth IRA. Well, you actually can't take out the earnings that Roth IRA earns without paying taxes on that for 5 years, right? You've got to wait 5 years. So that's the first 5-year rule. Now, this question is actually touching on a different 5-year rule, right? Surprise, there's two, right? So this second 5-year rule actually only counts for Roth conversions, okay? A Roth conversion is moving money from a traditional IRA or the traditional TSP over to a Roth IRA, okay? And this 5-year rule says, hey, every time you do a Roth conversion, a 5-year clock starts. Now, this gentleman or lady said, hey, it actually creates a new Roth IRA. It doesn't have to create a new Roth IRA. You could putting this Roth conversion into the same Roth IRA. It doesn't matter. Even to one that you started 20 years ago, you could put them all in the same account, but it does start a new 5-year clock. Now, this 5-year clock is different from the one I just mentioned. Okay, it is separate, different rule. Basically what it says is, hey, for every Roth conversion you do, for every time you take money from a traditional account, a traditional IRA, traditional TSP, a 5-year clock starts. And before that 5-year clock is up, you cannot take out that money that you converted without a 10% penalty, okay? Now, this 10% penalty is the same penalty that you pay or would pay if you take money out of retirement accounts before 59 and a half. Now, as you know, as federal employees with your TSP, there's one big advantage of the TSP, and that is if you retire in the year that you turn 55 or later, then you can actually access your TSP without this 10% penalty, which is great. Now, if you're special provisions FERS, it's even better. If you retire in the year that you turn 50 or later, you can access your TSP without that 10% penalty, okay? Now, this 10% penalty is relevant for Roth conversions because here's the deal. What you can actually do to access your traditional IRA money early without this 10% penalty is by using this 5-year rule, okay? So, for example, let's say you're actually 40 years old, okay? You're 40, you're not 59 and a half, you're 40. You have a bunch of money, let's say, in a traditional IRA. Is there any way to get access to that money before 59 and a half without the 10% penalty? Well, there actually is, okay? And it's by using this 5-year rule, because here's the deal. This is an example of how it would work. Let's say you're 40. Let's say you have $100,000 in a traditional IRA. Let's say you move $5,000 of that into a Roth IRA. So that's a Roth conversion. And like we just talked about, there's a 5-year clock for every Roth conversion that says, hey, when you do that, a 5-year clock starts, and you can't take out that $5,000 before that 5-year clock is over without that 10% penalty. So here's the deal. Let's say you're 40. Let's say you know that you're going to need some money at 45. Okay, you can convert over $5,000 from your traditional IRA over to the Roth IRA. Are you going to have to pay taxes in the year that you do that? Yes, you will. Okay, but you always have to pay taxes whenever you take money out of a traditional IRA. That's just how it works, even in retirement, right? So you move the $5,000 over, you wait the 5 years. Well, after that 5 years, guess what? With a Roth IRA, you can always take out your contributions even before 59.5 without taxes or a penalty. Your contributions. Anything that you put into a Roth IRA, you can always take out without taxes and without this penalty as long as you wait those 5 years. Okay? And so, therefore, you can access money from a traditional account as long as you just wait the 5 years. So, if you are planning in advance, then you can set yourself up to potentially have access to money before 59.5 just by using these different 5-year rules. Now, I know this 5-year rule thing can get very, very confusing. And if you're one of those people that really wants to dig super deep into these rules, a great resource for this is if into Google you type the 5-year rule Roth IRA Kitces, Kitces, Kitces. He is a blogger, a writer that talks about finance topics all the time. He's got an incredible article on the 5-year rule, both of them for Roth IRAs, that goes really, really deep. It's really long. It's probably 10,000 words or longer. It is very, very detailed. So if that's you, you definitely want to check that out. So that is some information about the 5-year rules that if you are going to be using a Roth account, whether the Roth TSP, a Roth IRA, going to do Roth conversions, any of these things, you want to make sure that you understand these 5-year rules so that you can get the most out of them. Because whenever there's a law or a rule, there's things, of course, you want to follow, but there's often some strategies then that you can use, like we just talked about, to get access to, potentially these traditional IRA, traditional TSP, these accounts early by doing some Roth conversions, waiting the 5 years, and then taking out, not the earnings, but the converted amount out of those accounts without taxes and penalties. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, I know if this is new to you, this may be really way too much all at once, right? And that is why when I saw this question that someone sent in, I'm like, wow, there is so much to this question. I'm going to do my very best to address it, but I know it's going to go a little long. So that's why I just had this question plus one other question I'm about to address now for this Q&A. So the last question is this. Someone says, hey, if you take out a TSP loan, where does the interest go? Does it get invested back into your account, or does the TSP collect it as a finance charge for the agency? So this is a great question. So for those that don't know, when you can take a loan out of your TSP, basically you're borrowing from yourself, okay? You take money out of your TSP, you use it for whatever, and you have to pay it back over time. But they do charge interest, okay? Now, this interest does go back into your TSP, right? And the interest rate is based on what the G fund is returning at the time that you take the loan. So it's generally pretty low, right? 2-3% or whatever the G fund is returning, which nowadays is very low. Okay, it's very low. So you do pay yourself back that interest. So it just goes back into your TSP account, which is the good news. But the true cost of a TSP loan is not the interest. That's not the cost, right? The true cost is the fact that money that you took out is not in your account growing, okay? That's the true cost. And if you have money consistently out of your TSP that could be growing, then that can really make a big, big difference over the course of your retirement. I mean, for example, let's say you take $10,000 out of your TSP for a TSP loan to do whatever, right? Whatever it is, to pay off bills, to go on a trip, whatever it is. I'm not a huge fan of the TSP loan. When it's needed, it can be helpful, right? Let's say you take it out. Well, let's say the stock market had a great year. Let's say it grew by 20%, okay? Well, that means that your $10,000 that was not inside the TSP could have grown up, by thousands of dollars, right? Potentially, depending on how you invested. And so that loan costed you a couple $1,000s, right? Again, the market can also go down when you take money out. You don't know, but that is the true cost over time. So over a long period of time, you really don't want to have a TSP loan outstanding if possible. But again, it can be super helpful depending on what you're trying to do, right? I mean, if you're trying to pay off credit cards and some high interest debt, then maybe that makes sense. That's a whole another conversation, but I wanted to address it a little bit, at least in response to this question. So that is the episode for today. If you have any questions, maybe follow-up questions, maybe put in the comments below. There are some great people in the community that really know a lot about this stuff that they definitely answer, and then definitely myself and the team, we try to get in the comments as much as we can, try to answer all your questions. But if you have any specific questions you want me to answer on a video just like this, there's a link below where you can do that. And I hope, again, this is helpful. That is our goal here at Haas Federal Advisors, to produce content and to serve you, right? Because we produce content on YouTube, on the podcast, on our website. There's tons of articles and tons of things for you. Definitely check that out at haasfederaladvisors.com, because we're here to serve you, whether it's just if you just consume the content, whether you hire us to help you plan for retirement or to manage money, whatever it is, we're here for you. And if you definitely want to learn more, there's a bunch of links in the description below about what we do, how we help people, and you have an incredible rest of your day. We'll see you next time.